Great, that's the whole sales pitch. How many of you actually read the magazine? You know, the six show next. They actually buy it and read it, and, you know, they don't get it for free or go on the digital. There's quite a few. Well, hopefully I've converted a lot more of you. Okay, well, anyway, my subject matter today is not to pitch the magazine at all. In fact, I'm very fortunate that I meet many people in the real estate world, and I get a sort of insight as to what they're doing. So I'm sort of from the outsider sort of looking in, and whether you are a big sort of property fund, or whether you're a private investor, doesn't matter where you are in the world, I tend to get the outside view sort of looking in. And they see me as sort of like the unbiased kind of version. Whereas if a competitor had to step in, they'd feel a little bit concerned. So what I'm going to talk about today is future trends in real estate. And I'm going to be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I must say this morning we've actually had a great conversation, you know, discussing, you know, quite a few broad bits about real estate. I'm happy to say that I'm actually going to pull this whole thing together. And I'm going to touch on each and every single one of them at some particular time. The first thing is I want to start off with the ugly, because the reason why I do that is that if you switch on your TV, you'll see that there's not a lot of good news that is actually going around. So I want to set that scene quickly and get it over very quickly, and then rather look at, you know, the good side of the things and what we can actually do about that. So we've heard about it this morning. We've got a struggling world economy. The world is still in distress. We just have to look what's happening in the UK now. A lot of people with this whole Scotland vote, they're not sure what's going to happen. And they're talking about the pound, which could be plunging. There's trouble in Syria, in Gaza, there's war, and it's all affecting economies all around the world. In South Africa, we've got our own problems as well. You know, people say dysfunctional municipalities, governments, etc. And so it really is a tough place at the moment. I'm not an economist, but essentially we know that it is tough out there at the moment. And really, I think we've got to take cognizance of that, of the outside world. And I'll get to a little bit later in terms of how do we deal with it. So, we all know Robin Williams, and he passed away recently. And he said, you will have bad times, but it will always wake you up to the good stuff you weren't paying attention to. And I think if we look at Warren Buffett, he invested in stocks the day that Pearl Harbor was bombed. The day that Pearl Harbor was bombed, he bought stocks. Everybody else bailed. So now we start looking at where's the market standing right now? Where's the market right now? Probably, is it a Pearl Harbor? Definitely not. So we've got to see where we've come from, where we've been, and where we're going. So I think Robin Williams' comment is really apt in terms of getting perspective on the market, but more importantly, getting perspective of ourselves and our perceptions of the market, that we don't take it in too deeply and react incorrectly. So, we know that investments can go wrong as well. We know that there's buildings that can collapse. We know that there's tenants that don't pay. You know, there's a whole host of things that can go wrong. Finance falls through, etc., etc., etc. So we really have to take cognizance of how do we actually respond to that. Yes, there's been a banking collapse, and of course it's very fresh in our minds. It's African Bank, and I mean it's 5.8 billion out the market. And yes, guess what? There's now a South African bailout right here in South Africa. We were talking about Lehman Brothers in 2008. We've got to repeat right over here. And my feeling is all about this is you need to start educating yourself how banking really works. And I think Dolph alluded to it a little bit this morning in terms of what securitization is. And it's very important to understand how banks actually take money in, how they loan money, and how they actually profit from it at the end of the day. And I think there's a certain way, and we've got the insider track to a lot of that information. And I think if a lot of you were exposed to that information, a lot of you wouldn't even approach the banks for money. Because normally what they do is they take that loan and they put it into a special purpose vehicle and they profit right up front. And when they want to foreclose, and we're going to get to that a little bit later, in terms of that, you find that the bank doesn't actually own the loan. They've actually sold it on. So if you say what's legal, what's illegal, that kind of stuff. So I'm not being negative about banks. All I'm saying is you've got to understand the process. You've got to understand securitization, how it works, and it will just open your eyes. That's what I'm really saying. There are other options which we spoke about this morning. It was Benjamin Franklin. And now he's on which dollar note is he on? He's a $100 note, Mr. Benjamin Franklin. And he made an apt statement over here. I mean, he said that credit is a system whereby a person who can't pay pays another person who can't pay to guarantee that he can pay. So if we start really understanding to the crux of the system, when you get a mortgage bond from the bank, all you're really doing is your ability to afford to pay that mortgage loan back. If you cannot pay that mortgage loan back, pretty much you're dead in the water. And a lot of people try to look for alternative forms to try and make up that kind of shortfall of that kind of finance. But that's what it is in a nutshell. And essentially, you are, as an individual, you are liable for that particular loan. And you are the person that's wrapped up in all that little paperwork and all those hundreds and piles of papers that you had to sign, that you had to do literally, it was quite a process to get it approved. So I think we just need to start understanding it. Litigation is on the increase. And why is it on the increase? Well, as soon as there's a crisis and then people are chasing money, they hand it over to the attorneys. So the first thing the banks do is that you don't talk to in the old days it was your bank manager. Currently you talk to some individual telephonically. In fact, sometimes you don't even meet that individual. You do it online. And you get your loan approved on that particular process. So if you look at, I think it's 2011, I was looking at the numbers. In the South Gauteng High Court, in 1 month, there was 285,000 summonses served on people that had not paid for properties in 1 month. So, and if we had to start looking at the trends of that kind of thing, so we just got to, what that actually demonstrates out there, that demonstrates the distress and the reality of what's actually really happening in the market out there. And you've got to understand that, and in terms of how that process works. So that's really what I want to do. So let's look at some of the more of the bad stuff that's happening. And this is my personal little bugbear, is that we've got a massive inequality and wealth gap over there. Still the people, I can tell you the majority of the people in this room are in a privileged position. More than 2/3 of the world are living on $2 per day. They have nothing. They're living in the shack, they're living in squalor. This morning we were talking about Lagos, Nigeria, and a very advancing city, it's growing fast. But in the big city, in Lagos, 2/3 of the people live in slum. 2/3. And my issue is, how do we address it? Not only in Africa, but in South Africa. We've got Petersen over here, which is an area which is grey. And we can no longer sweep this under the carpet. And it's the capitalists on the top, and we've got to look at it, and we've got to focus on it, we've got to find a way, we've got to find a solution as to how we address it, because we will benefit from that at the end of the day if we start making a contribution towards that. So this is a big thing for me. So at the moment I heard that we've got a backlog of affordable housing. It's something like 600,000 to 700,000 houses, and it's even more, I think. But if you look at the number of people that don't have a roof over their heads, I think it's more than 2 million plus in terms of that number. So this is a big thing. Just want to play this video. What's happening here? Just demonstrates what's happening out there. guys. But apparently it's coming to a robot close to you. Card machines. This was taken in India in particular. But doesn't that just set the reality of what's going on there? Every traffic light we come to, we've got somebody who's out of work, who's down and out, who needs a hand up. And, you know, we can't carry on like this. And it's not only a South African problem, it's a world problem. And we've really got to address, and I'll come back to that whole wealth and inequality gap that we've got to address. So, anybody recognize that property? Anybody want to make a guess? The most expensive property paid by taxpayers' money in Kandla. And yes, so we've got all these issues. We've got these government that is spending on, you know, stuff, and they're not putting it in the right direction. You know, they're not addressing the issues out there. And that's what we need to do. So, we know the debt thing, and the debt is absolutely huge. I think it's come down slightly. I mean, we saw it with the whole African bank issue, but households are, I think it's 75%, they're still paying on debt. And I think it's more than 50% or three months behind in mortgage payments. And that's a reality check of what's actually happening out there. So this whole debt issue is not going to just disappear. You know, somebody either has to write it off, or it has to be addressed in some other particular way. But it definitely is something which is weighing down. We've got to find a way. We've got to find a way to address this inequality. In terms of property, and I think there's a big focus if we look at worldwide, and I think Neale brought it up this morning, about doing a deep due diligence. As investors, we've got to be more selective to the kind of investments out there. And the kind of facilities, like if you look at the markets, which like the American markets, there's a massive need for hospitals, medical facilities, that kind of stuff. So you've got to understand what is moving in the direction of the demographic of that particular market, understand it, and that you can provide a property for that particular market. So investors need to be wiser. So there's good stuff out there as well, and there's actually a lot of good stuff. And we heard about it this morning, about Africa rising. And this is a wonderful, wonderful story. And I can tell you, in 2020, you know, Africa obviously is the most underserved continent right now. And I think by 2020, we'll start picking up major momentum. We talked about the top 7 African continents, or the top 7 economies in the world come from Africa. Top 7 fast-performing economies. Can't remember all of them, but it's from Mozambique, it's Kenya, it's Ethiopia, and Ghana, and there's a couple of others that's running as well. The other good news is that Africa has now got a Silicon Valley project in Kenya, Nairobi, and it's called Silicon Savannah. The Kenyan government is putting $14.5 million behind that to make that happen. $14.5 million. So you can see that the people that are serious about investing in Africa, it definitely is arising, and it's something that's going to take us through. Okay, then we spoke about this morning, about the surging high-end demand that's happening in residential property. And just on Friday, in fact, I spoke to Pam Golding and to Andrew Golding, and he was telling me that in the Atlantic seaboard area, they don't have stock. They sold out. There's 150% growth year on year. 150%. 150% growth. Now, ask them, well, where's it all coming from? Well, he said it's a combination. It's overseas buyers, and it's UK, there's even a couple of Americans, it's Portugal, it's Germany. Germany's a big player. And then, of course, is Africa that's also coming in. And they're starting to buy. But that's in the 10 million plus market. In the other markets, they're also picking up in a big way. But there's a major difference here in terms of what that demand is coming from. All these deals are cash. And I said, well, where are the local investors getting it from? Where are they getting the money? We've got a recession. It's tough out there. You know, the economy's falling apart. Where are they getting it? He says, no. He says, a lot of the people that have been buying are making money on the stock markets. And they're putting the money back into the economy. They're putting it back into the residential market. So, which is great news. So, we convert stock market investors into property investors. In the lower ends, they're not, the growth is not as rapid, but in Johannesburg in particular, in Hyde Park, last month, was something 70% growth year on year. So it's happening right here in Johannesburg as well. It's not just the Cape Town thing, it's not just a Atlantic seaboard thing. The question everybody's going to ask, is it sustainable? That's the big question. Is it sustainable? And I'm not sure about that. I don't think if I knew that answer, I would be extremely wealthy. But yes, but this is definitely a trend which is picked up. And in fact, you speak to a lot of high-end estate agents, which worries me. They think the property boom has come back. They seriously believe it. They say the property boom is back. We're back to 2005, 2006, where literally we could move that property very fast. The next big thing that's happened is green. Now, green, everybody used to think, green, tree hugger, all that kind of stuff. I can tell you, I was last week at the Green Building Council. I had some of my other journalist friends as well over there, were also there. It's now serious time. In fact, there's so many projects that are happening here in South Africa. Any new building gets rated for green building. And in fact, there's more than 3 million square meters of real estate that's already been approved for green building. That's new development commercial. The next step, they've already started a new initiative called My Green Home, and they've got a middle-class family. And what they've done is they've changed all their habits in the household. They've changed like the shower heads. They've turned the geyser down. The way that they put the rubble so that less goes into landfill. And it's just a matter of changing habits. And they actually got results that people save more than 50 to 60% a month just by starting to apply those small little habit changes in terms of that. And I can tell you going forward, the earth can't take much more landfill. When we start, we tend to run away to all these takeaway restaurants, and we get all these takeaway containers and that kind of stuff. Where does it all go? It all goes into landfill. I mean, we should be saying to these fast food guys, listen guys, start putting it on a plate. And the number of breakages versus the stuff going into landfill is, you can't even compare. So green is serious. So if you're looking at starting with any new development and you haven't had a green consulting part of it, I suggest I'll give you 10 years and it ain't going to happen. You've got to consider solar power. You've got to consider electricity. We've got a shortage of electricity. Eskom has got another bailout from the government. 50 billion. Who's going to sustain it? We have to start becoming saving oriented, and green is serious. The global stage is our new playground. We heard it this morning. I mean, you heard it from Dolph, you heard it from Scott, heard it from everybody. It's no longer just about the South African market. We also spoke about Africa and all the other countries. So from an investment perspective, global stage is a new playground. Other concepts that come in is rent to buy, and that's without using the banks, where there's a contractual arrangement between buy and seller, that kind of stuff. All new concepts coming in. So we talk about real estate changing, absolutely it's changing. The other thing is the digital age has arrived. It is here, officially. And I started a print publication 8 years ago, so I know firsthand it is officially here. And I come from a media background. In fact, part of the company, Naspas, who in fact launched Tencent, which I'll get onto a little bit later. Another one, I'm not going to carry on about crowdfunding. I believe it's going to change real estate in a massive way. It's going to change the way investments are. I'm not going to punt it any longer because I know Scotty's got a great story around that. It's a massive trend that's going to change the face of real estate. The rise of China and India, we've got to take cognizance of that. They say India has got the fastest growing population in the world, and by 2030 there's more babies born in India per hour than there is anywhere around the world right now. By 2030 they will have the highest population in the world. So we've got to understand the shifts and the movements and all that kind of stuff of what's happening and why it's moving and why that demographic shift is moving in that direction. So let's have a look at over here of all the technology companies that have come to the fore. We've got Google, we've got Amazon, we've got eBay, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and there's one called what? Tencent. So who the hell is Tencent? Do you know that they're the 4th largest technology company in the world? Did anybody know that? They're worth $150 billion. April 2012, they overtook Facebook. They're bigger than Facebook. Tencent, you know what makes them very different? They're owned by a 40% South African company in Naspers. 40%. So guess who's changing the world, guys? China and South Africa together. America, and they're catching up fast. So we've got to watch that 10 cent in terms of where they're going to be moving. Like it or not, whether you like social media, whatever it may be, you can leave it, but you're not going to benefit from it. You have to take it seriously. And as Chris Becker said, and he's the founder he's the chairman of Naspers, and also was the first person that invested into 10 Cent as an organization, said that if you're not there, then you're just going to lose out. And you've got to try and ride the bandwagon. You have to. If you don't like Twitter, jump on Twitter, do the thing. I know some people say, too difficult. Learn it, do it. Now, you don't know what's going to happen in 6 months' time to a year. Some new technology will come along. Maybe 10 Cent comes along with something. They're really good. WeChat, WeTransfer, all that kind of stuff. That's there. You know, so there's all the new kind of technology. So I'm going to talk quickly just about 5 ways to capitalize on the trends. And I mentioned the social media. And I spoke of this about a little bit earlier, your inner world and your outer world. Because if you look at the outer world right over there, we see the economies in the world, they're in distress. And I think it's so important how we respond to that. And that's why it's so important that we've got to look after our inner world. That, you know, if you're watching too much TV, then I can guess that your inner world's also in a bit of distress as well. Because it ain't good, especially if you watch a lot of news and that kind of stuff. So, and I've said, you know, the control of your mindset is just really so important in terms of everything and absolutely everything you do. Control it. Control your media consumption. The emergence of the smart consumer is here. We've got to take it. Do you know that? You know that 40. You know which is the biggest growing market in games, in the gamification industry? Anybody want to hazard a guess? That's women 40 years plus.
Wow.
Candy Crush and all those games and all those wonderful things. That's the biggest market for gamification right now. So, but it's an incredible growing market, but we've got to take cognizance of this. If you want to reach that market or whatever it may be, that's how you reach it, gamification. So, yes, so between success and failure, we've got to be able to, understand what makes success, what makes failure, and more importantly, I mean, we've got to learn from our failures. We've got to say, well, what did I learn? Because I found really from my personal experience, I haven't learned much from my successes, but I tell you what, I've learned a lot from my failures. And I think that is the part that you struggle through, you work through, and over the years that I've also done personal investing. And that's also what I like to share with people, to make them, fast track them to successful results. The other thing that we've got to take cognizance going forward, all around the world, we've got to start collaborating with governments, as difficult as it may be. But if you want to become serious investors, we heard this morning with Neale, I mean, they want to be big players in the retail sector. So we've got to start collaborating with governments. We've got savvy investors and consumers out there. You've got to educate yourself. They've got technology that they can invest with. And so yeah, this is Chris Becker. And I mean, these are the guys that are changing the world. This is the Nuspass investor. And he's, just to think 12 years ago, in fact, I worked with a company about 14 years ago when he just came on board. And in fact, most of their business was in the report, newspaper, the burger, all that kind of stuff, magazines. It's only, at that time, it was 30% of their business. Today, it's less than 5%. Less than 5% of the income comes through the print business. So that just shows a visionary of somebody that had it. You've seen the Mark Shuttleworth story, and what he did, and how he went up into space. And I don't know what it is about our South African guys. I mean, Elon Musk has this plan to get to Mars. And what he has done, and South African people doing extraordinary things. And I think that's the point that I'm trying to get here. So, there's a guy, Sia Zuza. Now, Sia Zuza was being well promoted by Clem Sunter. And a little bit of story about this guy. I mean, he developed rocket fuel. And he entered into a local science project fair, and he came first. The wonderful story is he went to an international engineering and science fair, somewhere in Albuquerque, what have you, with 52 countries, 1,500 entries, and he won it. Incredible, incredible story of a South African. His whole motivation for everything was he wants to get to Jupiter, so he developed rocket fuel for that. So, all I'm really just trying to say is that the country that we developed, that our former President Nelson Mandela, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So my question is to you guys in closing. What is your dream? What is the difference that you want to make in your particular niche, in your particular industry? What is it that you want to do? What part of the world do you want to make a difference? All these people went through massive struggles, starting from nothing in a lot of cases. And that's what I've seen. I've seen a number of real estate investors start with nothing, with absolutely nothing, and then really build up a fantastic portfolio. So that's how I'd like to end here today and just say, what is your dream? Thank you very much.